All right, everyone. So just a couple of minutes after, we will go ahead and get started. Folks that join us later, that is just fine. So for those that have attended before, it's kind of going to be a little bit of a similar intro, but we'll kind of make it quick. So hello and welcome again. My name is Victoria Castor. I am the Water Conservation and Sustainability Coordinator for the City of Peoria. Turn that. And so we have had the honor of partnering with ASU's Project Cities. I've got a team of graduate students that have been helping me with this particular phase of our sustainability plan. And part of that includes their fantastic help in hosting these town hall sessions that we have. So thank you to our ASU partners. We have Kayla, Lauren, and Casey that are on the line with us, as well as Stephen, who's kind of our running background tech as things pop up. So thank you to ASU for helping us and for joining us tonight. So before I kind of dive into the nuts and bolts and the different categories, I wanted to kind of provide a quick update about why we're doing things a little bit differently with this particular plan than we have in the past. So our goal for this plan is for it to be a community-driven document. And for it to be that, we really have to make sure that we are reaching out to the community and really understanding what our residents and our community feel is important for us to include in this plan. So we want to know your vision and your ideas for what a sustainable Peoria is, kind of within these topics that we have set up. And that way we can really work on aligning what we're putting into this plan with what our community's needs actually are. And so this is why your input and your information is critical to this process, because we really can't have a community-driven document unless we have your insight as to what should be included. So we thank you so much for joining us. We know that your time is precious, and we appreciate you taking out some of your evening to join us. So next slide, you can kind of see, the agenda. We're going to go urban forms first, and then we'll have I'll quickly describe what the topic is. Introduce our staff members, and then we'll jump into an open comment period for each of the topics. So next slide. So our first topic tonight, of course, is urban form. And so we've kind of defined what the category is, and then we have two example goals, just to kind of give an idea of some actions and some things that would fit within the category. To kind of help spur some ideas and kind of see where the possibilities are. So for urban form, we have adopt green planning and building practices that protect natural resources and air quality, allowing us to invest in a safe, healthy, active, and equitable lifestyles for all community members. So first example goal would be promote land use patterns and sustainable development practices that improve quality of life and positively affect the environment by incorporating smart growth principles into the city's codes and regulations. And then second, we have explore and adopt green infrastructure policies and practices that are appropriate and work well within our climatic region. And this is something that Peoria has really put a focus on, which I think is fantastic, about making sure that whatever we are setting forth in our design and our planning fits our climatic region, because Arizona is unique. We are very different, and a lot of things that work in other places may not work the same here. And so kind of understanding that and making sure that what we choose to do here really fits for our environment. So our fantastic staff that we have joining us, our expert tonight is Cody Gleason, and he is a principal planner for the city. So thank you, Cody, for joining us tonight and helping to answer any questions that might pop up. All right, so next slide, and then we will kind of jump into our open floor. So one thing too, we are going to be using a platform called Whiteboard. So it takes a moment for us to switch over, but basically it is a way for us to real time, while we're having this conversation with you all, to be able to kind of write and capture your comments and the answers, so that it's really clear and really transparent that we're recording everything, and that you can make sure that what you recommended or what might have been said has been captured properly. So we're kind of excited to use this new platform to help make sure that we're getting all the commentary right. All right. So Cody, did you have any like fun facts to kind of get us started off tonight about planning and design here in Peoria?
Sure. So I guess a lot of people really don't end up knowing what planning does, other than the Seinfeld episode about the kid wanting to go from architecture to planning a city. Um, so really, what we look at is primarily context. So when a development comes in, we try and evaluate, okay, what is the most appropriate use here? And kind of along the lines of what you were saying, Victoria, is we try and evaluate, is it the highest and best use for not only usability and land use perspective, but with that in mind, we try and evaluate, okay, is there water reuse that we can look at requiring the developer to tie into in the area? Is this a location where higher density is more appropriate, because then we have ultimately a lower impact on the infrastructure and kind of a lower overall footprint that ends up getting constructed for the development. So um, I think those are probably good examples of how we try and tie into sustainability and the focus on urban form as it relates to sustainability.
Excellent. Great. This is a really good kind of example to put forth of how some of that process works in the city. Anyone from I call it from the crowd, right? From the audience, have any questions or have any ideas for us to kind of think about as we move forward with the sustainability plan and this particular topic? So again, kind of urban form and city planning. Is there anything that's kind of near and dear to your heart, or any ideas that you have seen elsewhere that you think could be important for your community and kind of the future of Peoria? And of course, we do have the chat feature as well. So feel free to type in if you would prefer that rather than the microphone and speaking.
I could just start reading the zoning ordinance if you want. That'll force people to talk.
Right. So I do have a question, Cody. Is there like one particular thing that you have seen Peoria kind of start in the past, let's say the past 5 years, that really kind of focuses on the desert? So something that would be very unique to where we live versus what might be planned elsewhere?
So I don't know that specifically within the last 5 years. As you know, we recently completely rewrote our City of Peoria general plan. We had a very heavy focus on that with respect to sustainability. And with that in mind, we're trying to now move from that broader picture plan to how do we put this into practice, and how do we incorporate these elements within more of those specific and action plan items. We also, I want to say it was probably about 7 years ago now, but we did the Sonoran Preservation Plan. So, I think when people think, green and sustainability, they typically think about a product that's being produced, or some sort of material. But in that respect, we kind of had a focus on sustainability of the natural environment. And if anyone's ever gone hiking up in North Peoria, there's really just some great views and beautiful scenery that you can get to. And it provides an opportunity to save that and preserve it for the future. And I think maybe that's a part of the sustainability that folks don't always think of right off, that we wanted to try and make sure and incorporate within our future goals.
a great point, and I also was so excited to learn about the storm preservation plan or the plan that went through for that. So that was something exciting when I first started with Peoria to learn about. So we do have one question from Steve. He says, how is planning involved with downtown revival, which is near and dear to a lot of cities as they are trying to get those areas back?
Certainly. So we actually have, I've been with the city for, um, gosh, almost 14 years now. And I've never seen this amount of interest and activity in the downtown area. So with that, we're really trying to make sure that, again, we're looking at that appropriate context for development. Really in a downtown area, you're typically looking at more urban form, which is usually higher density, and then provides opportunities for things like walkability, transit, which I'm sure Kathy will touch on as we get to that section. But it provides a lot of opportunities for that critical mass that you need to have a more urban environment. So with that, we actually have a lot of applications in or that will be coming in soon, that we're going to be looking to make sure that they implement portions of the Old Town Specific Area Plan, which points towards those goals of walkability and transit, so that we're not just continuing to sprawl out around the edges. We actually have that critical mass in the downtown area.
Excellent. And that's really great to hear that we have a lot of interest of people moving their businesses and kind of developing those areas. So that's wonderful. So we have kind of a follow-up from Stephen. It says, planning for density is more popular in some communities than others, sometimes down to the neighborhood level. Can you speak to public support for a denser development in Peoria? And is it concentrated in specific areas, which I know you kind of mentioned that downtown designated area?
Yeah, so in planning right now, I'm sure plenty of people have heard these terms before, but there's kind of two factions when you go out to the public anymore. It's NIMBYism or YIMBYism. So you have either ardent support for density because they see the value return in that proposed density. You get those things like it allows commercial developments to remain viable when they have that population center, that population density right near them. You also have the folks that perhaps have moved out here from other states or locations, and the typical idealized Arizona is wide open spaces. So their goal is to keep it that way. So I think it all goes back to context and us trying to make sure that we're maintaining that appropriate context. And when we're evaluating a proposal, we're saying, okay, what is it next to? What is the actual physical form that's around it? And is there an appropriate transition location where you can go from something like single family to then multifamily to then commercial, or have that mixed use opportunity in there?
Excellent, thank you. So I'll leave kind of a pause for anyone to speak up before I kind of move into the next question in the chat. All right, so we have one more question that came through in the chat was, how is Peoria, this is from Daniel, attempting to counteract urban heat islands, sorry, got tongue tied. Are we planning for more open space, or is there kind of a model city that we are interested in following when it comes to some of the methods to try and counteract that?
So I think that's a great question considering our miserable summer.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how it would get hotter longer than what we ultimately had. Um, so right now within the zoning ordinance, we actually have a minimum requirement of 20, and it can change depending on the entitlement for the development, but typically 20% of the development is required to be landscaping. Um, with that in mind, that usually ends up accounting for things like parking lot islands or street frontage, along the sidewalk. What we're looking at doing in the future, and hopefully we'll be bringing something forward to further evaluate this, is are there things that we can incorporate that are low impact development principles? Whether that is grasscrete instead of just asphalt paving somewhere, or is there awning elements or form walls that can be placed in front of windows so that the lighting still enters, but at the same time they're not running the AC all the time because the actual heat isn't making it to the building. So those sorts of things are items that we're going to be looking at. I don't know that we have a particular model city that we've identified at least yet. Perhaps that's something that we can bug project cities to help us find and look for in the future as we move forward with the ideas for low impact development concepts. But certainly something that we want to engage going forward.
Excellent. So one kind of follow-up question to that from Steve is there a building height limit within the city limits?
There is, and it ultimately all depends on the zoning. So for different zoning districts, there are different heights that are allowed. For instance, in some industrial districts, you'll go up to 60 feet because really you need that vertical space to accommodate all the manufacturing or warehousing or what have you within the building itself. Typical height limitations for something like a single family residential would be 30 feet. That'll usually allow for 2 stories and then some architectural embellishments. If the architect's creative enough, they can fit 3 stories in that, but it's pretty rare, and I think a lot of people don't want to walk up 3 flights of stairs, is why we usually don't see that. But there's it kind of runs the gamut of height limitations, but all dependent on the zoning.
And great question too. That is something, you was wondering why you maybe don't see a lot of extra ones, but the fact that it depends on how you're zoned kind of makes sense as well, since it would change up what type of businesses or structures you're going to have. Well, wonderful. So I will leave kind of a pause here. So I don't want to, people are chatting or if someone wants to speak up, I don't want to keep cutting anyone off. So I'll kind of pause it here for about 30 seconds and see if we have any other comments coming through. Susan, did you have a question or comment for us?
Can you hear me?
I can.
Oh, oh no, my only comment is way to carry the torch. Great job. And it looks like you're making some more detailed progress than we've been able to make in the past. I think I do have a question in that, how is the new urban sustainability plan going to be connected to the general plan? Because there's the newly adopted general plans. So is it specifically different? Is it connected? So I didn't know I was not muted. Sorry.
No worries, Susan. And that's a real great, That's a great question too. So I'll take a
Yeah.
first stab, and Cody, you might be able to add to that. So the intention is for the sustainability plan. The general plan had already been set when we kind of got rolling on this, but we definitely want these two plans to work together and not separate. So as part of our matrix for running up the chain, what goals and actions in this plan, kind of where they fit, we are planning to run them through a matrix, which includes the livability goals that were set in the general plan. So we're making sure that whatever items are in the sustainability plan are aligning with our general plan. And then by having our awesome green team, which Cody is a part of, what we're moving forward in these goals and actions, by working with the different departments, we're making sure that things are going to align. And hopefully they work together. So we've got the general plan, and then the sustainability plan can help support those green infrastructure ideas and things, and really continue to put the emphasis that that's the direction that we kind of want to go. Cody, did you
That
have
makes sense. Good job. That
Thank you.
clearly makes sense.
Yeah, Victoria, I completely agree with that. And, we're always evaluating the general plan. We don't want it to be a static document. The idea is that, it's more of a living document that we're amending to reflect the vision and goals of the city. So with the sustainability plan being implemented and amended, we would evaluate whether or not we should move forward with any amendments to the general plan, or at least the applicable portions of it, so that we can tie those back into the general plan and make sure that we're kind of like Victoria said, keeping those documents in alignment with each other as we move forward.
As per form. Good.
All right, and so I think one last question, unless something else pops up. So Casey says, are there incentives for developers to utilize sustainable building practices when they build within this?
So currently, there are not financial incentives. One thing that we've thought about and looked at, and I think and I hope that we're going to continue evaluating, is how do we incentivize green building practices without necessarily using city funds for that. So are there things that we can do to get the developer to engage in those practices without spending city money? And it could be things like providing density bonuses depending on if they reach a certain tier of, say, LEED certification. I know that there were a couple other certifications, but I think Victoria, correct me if I'm wrong, I think they merged together just to be LEED. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Star communities and yeah.
Yeah. So it could be things like those density bonuses, or, are we reducing minimum parking requirements so that not only then are we incentivizing them to, bring those innovative projects to the city, but we're also, kind of tangentially removing the dependence on the automobile, which is, again, hopefully helpful in that sustainability focus.
Great. Thank you, and great question. And urban form also ties really directly into some of the air quality items that go forward as well. So how we plan and how, same with transportation. So both of these kind of come together and have a lot of air quality impacts as well. So as we move into transportation, as you said, different forms that we're building in, that will also play a role in that aspect. So that is great. I don't see any other questions coming in. So I think we can go ahead and begin to scoot to our next topic, which is going to be transportation. But I will give it a 30-second wait to make sure that I'm not cutting anyone off. All right, so we will go ahead and move to transportation. And thank you again, Cody, for all that amazing information. All right, so transportation, next slide. So transportation, we are saying, is to create an affordable, efficient, dynamic, reliable, and integrated transportation system serving all people. So some example goals of this would be to enact policies that promote municipal and regional mobility priorities for pedestrians, transit, and alternative forms of transportation. Another example would be to promote public transportation ridership and the use of fuel efficient or alternative fuel vehicles. So our amazing staff and our expert that is joining us tonight is Kathy Kolbach, who is our transit manager. And so I will open up the floor here. Again, we're going to switch back to our whiteboard session. Transportation is something that's definitely probably near and dear to everyone's heart because we all have to use it. We all have to get ourselves back and forth. And I think what COVID has maybe taught us this last year is that that can change, and that sometimes we're coming up with innovative ways to potentially get around and to maybe not have to use transit quite as much as well. So kind of an interesting, I think, time and maybe shift in transportation that we've seen in the past year or so. All right. So Kathy, to start us off, did you have any fun facts or any transit information that you would like to share with the group?
I sure do. Thanks, Victoria. It is so much fun to talk about transportation because it is such an overarching, encompassing topic, and it really focuses on how's the best way to move people, whether they're in cars, whether they're pedestrians. Cody was talking about how we work together to make new areas walkable. Transit works when people can access, via transit and then get to a place that they can walk to their end destination. So lots of transportation touches everyone. So the city of Peoria, as far as on the transit side of transportation, actually has 4 major bus routes, 2 that go north-south. One is on 67th Avenue, one is on 83rd Avenue, and then 2 more that go east-west. One is on Peoria Avenue and one is on Thunderbird Road. And in fiscal year 19, we provided over 221,000 trips just on transit in the city of Peoria. And we all know that COVID has affected us, especially in transit. So we did have a drop in ridership, but we are seeing that pick up. So there are ways to get around in the city of Peoria using transit, and we are looking at optional ways. Transit is changing dynamically with new technologies. We've got the Ubers and Lyfts out there. We just recently demoed our RoboRide project, which is an autonomous vehicle. COVID again impacted RoboRide, but we are excited when we get the opportunity again to bring out to our residents ways that they can try not having to rely on your own vehicle the whole time to get around. In the future, there'll be many more ways to go about your business in a more sustainable way.
Excellent. I was sad that I missed my opportunity to check out the RoboRide. So I was excited about that cool pilot that was going on, but sadly I missed my opportunity. So hopefully as that gets back going, and I'll get my next shot to take a ride on that particular one.
Actually, it was received very well.
Great.
Oh. I just have a quick question. What is the city of Peoria doing to cut back on traffic jams and keep up with the new developments, such as the HOA communities and stuff, to ensure timeliness so that people aren't getting stuck in, one way in, one way out, only one freeway to get to type of situations?
So I can speak a little bit on that. That's a different group, but I know that as any project comes in, there's a pretty involved development plan that involves not only transit, but transportation, engineering, the planning folks. And we look at, there's traffic studies that are done for new projects that come in that will project the amount of additional traffic it will bring. And there are requirements made of developers in certain cases to increase roadway if that capacity is needed. Signals across the valley are within cities are timed, but then there's certain streets, like for example, Bell Road. A number of years ago, Maricopa County did a project with all the cities that had Bell Road in it to do a signal timing project for the entire roadway to help manage the systems. Traffic signals now are smart signals, so they actually can detect different things going on in the road and adapt to that to help the flow of traffic. So there's a number of things that get into put into play as developments come on and as new traffic comes into certain areas.
So kind of a question that follows in line with that one is there is a high percentage of people in Peoria that commute to Phoenix to work. Is Peoria doing anything to kind of help make that commute more sustainable?
Yeah, great question. So we manage not only the traffic that are the people that want to use transit within Peoria, but we recognize that people want to go out of Peoria as well. So there's a regional system made up of every city in the Valley under the title of Valley Metro. And so we work up with all our neighboring cities. And in the case of some express routes that used to be very busy prior to COVID, we partner with them. So we actually have Grand Avenue Limited that stops at the Park and Ride down in Old Town Peoria and takes Grand Avenue into downtown Phoenix. But we also partner with the city of Glendale to fund the 2 express buses that come from the west side of the valley. One goes down the Loop 101 southbound, one goes west to the 17, the one that goes southbound on the 101 goes to the I-10, and takes a number of commuters from the Northwest Valley down into Peoria to work. And then at the end of the workday, they bring them back to their cars at the Park and Ride. And Peoria just opened, it's a little over 1 year old now, our new Park and Ride down at 83rd Avenue in Peoria and Grand. Interesting little side note about that, talking about sustainability. We decided to not use asphalt for that project. We do have pervious concrete to help to mitigate the urban heat island effect that we were just talking about a while ago. Covered parking, we do have covered bus shelters to provide shade respites for anyone using transit. And we are now working in tandem with the shade initiative that the city has to put additional shades at some of our bus stops. There's one at 67th and Peoria that has an additional shade, which even if you're not taking the bus, as people are getting more mobile just on foot, there's some shade respite areas along the way.
Is Peoria looking into doing any white roads? I've seen that they've started painting roads white and trying to lessen the heat area. Is Peoria looking into doing any of that?
So that's a great question, and I am not sure of the status of that, but I'm sure that we can find someone to get back an answer for that question a little later. That would be our traffic engineering folks.
I can actually speak to that one a little bit.
There you go.
So regionally, the city of Phoenix is actually doing some tests on this, some pilot projects, and it has been done in several other cities, but what they have found is that the white streak actually reflects back on the pedestrians and the homes and the businesses and actually creates an uncomfortableness for them. So there's a couple different products that are not the white, but different color levels that still reflect, but they still kind of have that heat, right? They're reducing it, but not quite as reflective. And so we are watching that closely to see how that test run goes in Phoenix. And kind of as a region, we're all kind of watching that. So I would say we haven't seen too much yet, but it's coming. But when we do it, we want to make sure that we're not creating a more uncomfortable situation for pedestrians or for the businesses that are right alongside those roads as well.
Funny you say that, because that's actually what I've heard as well. In Tempe, they have white lines in the roads. And I've heard multiple times that those white lines, whenever it's, you know, dusk time getting home, it's really bad for the reflection. So I was curious if there was any alternatives that they have discovered at this time, or if they're just working on a shade of white that doesn't reflect as bad.
Yep, technology is moving up in that area, and so it'll be interesting to see, but there's definitely several options that are coming forward. And then we have one other question or comment. I'm sorry, did I cut someone off? Okay, so shaded bus stops, this is from Stephen, are of course fantastic, especially for cities like ourselves. They address the social equity, environmental impacts, and economic opportunities. So they love that Peoria is prioritizing the shade and beating back that urban heat island. So that is definitely true. I've talked with our Parks Department a little bit about the awesome shade plan that they are creating, which Kathy, you mentioned. It's not only trees, which we love our trees because they are a benefit in so many ways, including shade, but also in certain areas where maybe trees aren't functional, what are some other shade options? So it's fantastic to hear that there's a focus on our transit ways to making sure that those are maybe the areas that get shade first. So wonderful kind of news on that front. We have one other question from Steve. This has the city considered solar panels on the parking lot shades and in other areas?
Good question. So we did look at solar for the parking lot that we did for the bus shelter, and it didn't turn out to be too feasible in that application, but I know that we do have the use of solar on several other parking structures in the city. So it kind of depends on the parking structure. So the general answer is yes, we are. It depends on where it is, and there's got to be certain dynamics in play for that to work. But yeah, definitely.
And I'm sorry, Steve. Oh, go ahead.
There's a question on Pogo.
Yes, I was going to go. Yes, go ahead. So, is Pogo going to continue going forward, and will it be extended to Paloma Park?
Great question. So Pogo, unfortunately, was a victim of of the pandemic as well. So we were in the middle of taking our citizens' input and revising some of the Pogo routing. So the answer is yes, Pogo is going to be coming back. If things are looking good for just people to start gathering again, the plan is to start the service in April. And it will be changed. So it is going to now be running Friday, Saturday, and Sundays from about 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. And it is going to serve more areas of the city than it was doing previously. So there will be some information coming out on that. Our main goal is to connect our residents to the destination points. So each of the 3 major bus routes will be going into the P83 area. They will be going to Arizona Broadway Theater. They will be going to Old Town. So when we have our festivals, people have an option to take transit instead of everybody driving their cars down. One bus will go to Park West. We'll have a bus going to Rio Vista. There's a whole bunch of other areas that we'll be serving. So as long as things are looking good with gathering groups, we'll have Pogo running again as a transit option in Peoria. Thanks for the question.
That's definitely a lot of growth transportation. I just have one last question for you, Kathy. Are you guys, or is the city of Peoria, not you guys, is the city of Peoria diligently working to include more car charging stations?
Yes, great question for that too. So we just, as part of our Park and Ride project, where we take people down to Phoenix to work, and the express bus comes back, we have added 2 charging stations there. There are other places on city facilities where there are charging stations as well. So that is definitely something that the city has implemented and continues to look at as we do projects.
And are we seeing a raise in the usage of that now that the chargeable cars are more popular? Are we having issues with sustaining the amount of individuals that do have those rechargeable cars at this time?
So we definitely see that there's use. I'm aware of 4 stations, and particularly the one at the Park and Ride, because I do monitor that regularly. We do have a regular user who uses the charging station there. And I definitely think that we will see continued increase of use as people get more cars that run on alternate fuels, which is certainly something that we recognize the value in as we're looking at sustainability options.
And is there a way that the city can make that well, they break even eventually, but would there be able to be some sort of profit made off of the charging stations that can go back into maintenance and updating, adding more charging stations to the city?
So we don't actually charge anyone to use the charging stations. So we're not taking in any revenue for that. That is something that we recognize as a community benefit as people are choosing to use different alternative fuels. So there is no charge to use those stations.
Now, is that just the cities in general? If there's a private parking garage and they have charging stations in there, can they personally charge to profit off of those in their parking garage, or is that just not something Peoria does at all?
So we don't have any tie-ins with any of that. I can only speak to the ones that we're doing here in Peoria. I believe that there are some others, though, that also are available to the general public to use, and there's not a fee for those, and they are in a private area.
And Stephen has one follow-up. So our stations, they're city-owned. They're not third-party.
Correct. We installed them at our Park and Ride. The ones at the Park and Ride are the city's stations. Yeah, and anybody can use them there. Yes.
Excellent.
It is great to see them used. It's an exciting thing to know that is being used as technology now.
Yeah. And it's exciting. I know that there's been some hiccups on different cities with some of the contracts that are set forth for kind of like leasing these stations. So it's nice that Peoria, when they decided to do it, they decided we were just going to do it. I want to do it right and not have to have that battle with the contract and fees that may pop up later on. So that's refreshing.
Yes, it's working well.
Yes. Looks like one other question is, are there plans to incorporate more sustainable transportation infrastructure like roundabouts within the city? Which roundabouts I know are hit or miss. You either love them or you hate them. So I know there's like side of the fence you stand on.
Yeah, and that would be, I think that those options are looked at as new development comes in. So that's something that is taken on a case-by-case basis. I do. Stephen, yes, love them or hate them, just like Victoria was saying. Yeah, but they are options that traffic engineers look at as we're looking at moving traffic. So, but they are specific to certain areas. You have to have the ability to do that in the right of way and make sure that it makes sense and can be implemented safely. So, definitely considered.
Yes, I know in high pedestrian areas, intersections are not always the safest, just because it's too many things, I think, for drivers to try and track.
Yeah, and safety is a big thing that gets considered in all of these options. In the transit, when we're looking at where we're going to place the bus stop, we need to make sure, those considerations, the roadways, all of that safety is a big consideration.
Do we find that major corporations that have larger amounts of associates and employees are becoming more interested in possibly investing in building in Peoria because they're looking at the sustainability options? Is it attracting more people to want to invest?
Cody, that could be a question partly for you as well.
Well, I know that in some companies, they won't move to certain cities because the transportation, the roadways, the parking availability for that type of reasons. So I'm just like, is the new improvements, the new implemented thought process and sustainability action plan, do we think, or has it already brought back into more investors?
As far as an investment tie-in, I don't know the metrics.
And
or
when
the
I say investment, I mean like opening a business. like opening a new location, you know, that type of thing. That's what I mean by invest, not like actually invest in the city, but, you know, open a business there and have something functioning and operating there.
The attractiveness of the city. Yeah.
Yes, basically the sustainability is a very attractive quality right now, as many of us are recognizing that sustainability, you know, you have to build a sustainable company to be sustainable. So many of us are realizing this is more of an important entity at this time. So a lot of organizations I've done a little bit of research on are looking for sustainable cities to build their sustainable communities and, you know, contribute back and work together with communities. So I was just wondering if Peoria was one of those that are getting attractions and now at this time.
I don't know from a business attraction perspective. That's certainly something that we could reach out to our economic development department and find out more information. You know, they get inquiries from an organization called GPEC. And through those inquiries, they research certain sites. I know a lot of times in those inquiries, they'll ask particular information about the city or a particular area. I don't know if those include questions about the sustainable practices of the city or the focus of the city, but that is kind of one of the reasons that we wanted to have such a focus on sustainability when we did the general plan. Was it, you know, it's not, you know, it's not exactly a new idea, but at the same time, it is the future. So if we can't engage in these sorts of practices going forward, then, you know, our attractiveness, kind of as you're referencing, is going to die off. So we've tried to put the policy framework in place, and now we're just working on moving forward and incorporating that kind of on a wider scale throughout the city.
Excellent. That's a great summary, Cody. And as we know, a lot of the big corporations, Amazon and Intel, and some of these really big ones, we know that they are kind of looking at, they have their own sustainability metrics in-house that they have to follow. So they have to find a location that kind of matches some of those goals. So even though we may not directly have a source yet, as he mentioned, it's kind of the way of the future. And by doing this, we're keeping that door open to make sure that it's not negatively impacting us, that we're ready, and we can also show that we're kind of a greener city to move businesses to. So thank you everyone so much. I'm going to wait 30 seconds, see if there's any last minute comments before we go ahead and wrap it up with our conclusion.
I had a question. I live in North Peoria, have lived up here in Vistantia since 2008. And it's probably quadrupled in size since we've been here. And I know Pogo came out to Happy Valley Road, but really the transit does not encompass the sizable territory and population of the area up here. The area up here might represent 40,000. When I worked at the city years ago, of course, we worked on Old Town area, P83 and Bell Road. But I think it's very important to start working on some transit options or some kind of sustainability option for traffic and transportation. There's a huge impact up here just in the dozen or so years we've lived up here. So it's something that I would encourage to put in the plan for a future goal or consideration as this area continues to expand to the north. It's almost like a separate city area. So it's just a thought. And I get it from a lot of my neighbors. So I thought I'd share that.
So we actually, when we start running the new Pogo service, we will have a route that does start up in the Vistancia area. So we heard from our residents that they wanted that service available to them, and Vistancia is one of the areas. So we will be having a route come out there, and I'm happy to share that information with you if you want to.
Yeah, excellent. It's, that I can share it with the neighbors. You can put it on Nextdoor and all
Yeah.
of those.
Yep.
It's just an observation. We have to start doing things differently up here.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
becoming an urban area.
And we do look at the considerations, actually talking about all these plans, the sustainability plan, the general plan. We are doing a transit master plan as well, so that we will have the guiding documents. So we're going to be shortly trying to get some resident input on that, building that plan as well.
Okay.
Eyes right on sustainability. Yeah, so that, because it's part of it. So definitely we want to get our citizens input on that as well.
I wanted to tell you that in my class that I teach at ASU, you are one of the stars. And remember when you did that video? Anyway, people really appreciate, and they appreciate to see women working in this field, and as well as the men. But kudos to all of you. You're doing a great job.
Thank you, Susan.
Yeah. All right.
All right, everyone. Well, that was a great question, and super exciting to hear that some of those new routes are going to better incorporate our fast growing northwest part of Peoria.
Yes.
So very exciting. All right, everyone. So we are going to go ahead and head back into the more PowerPoint format and kind of close up for tonight. Give us a moment to try and switch screens. And one of the things I'll talk about is that there are going to be many different ways that you all can continue to provide information to us for this plan. We just talked about a whole lot of information, and I know it can be overwhelming. So after your brain is kind of maybe settled and noodled, and if more ideas come to the surface, you feel more than like, if you're, please, as I get tongue-tied, send us an email to the email that we have listed at the bottom of the screen. We are happy to take your commentary and any other ideas that may come to mind after tonight, and incorporate it into our engagement and into our database. That email is conservation@peoriaaz.gov. And then here in just a moment, I'll talk about another way that you can also stay engaged and provide us some insight. So our next steps. So we have 2 more of our wonderful town hall sessions that are going to be popping up. So we've got next week, I believe, is water and waste. And then the week after, which will be our final one, we'll be covering the topics of building and energy, which is kind of municipal building and energy, and then also our community outreach and education. So we hope to see everyone at our other topics. Another next step that we have is we are going to have an online survey that is going to be available here within the next week or so. We're working on putting it in the format right now, so it'll be live as soon as we can get it out. And this will be another way you can just answer questions about the different topics, and there'll be a space for you to kind of write ideas within each category and area as well. We also plan to have a print copy or PDF version of that in English and in Spanish. So if you don't want to necessarily do that online, we will have other options to be able to get that input back. And then lastly, on my next steps is we're going to wrap up this, basically this information gathering that we're doing from the community. And we will probably wrap that up in early to mid-March. That way we've got time to really collect the information. And then after that is beginning our drafting of this plan. So kind of being able to outline with all the information that everyone's provided, really set the outline and the framework for the plan going forward. So sorry guys, and we're a little bit behind on the slides, but I was just talking because I didn't want to hold anyone back. I know 7 o'clock is approaching. I would like to thank you all again so much for joining us tonight. We know that your time is precious, and we value your opinion and your input as we go through this process. We really hope that you stay engaged with us through this process. One new way that we have to stay engaged is a sustainability newsletter. If you go to the sustainability website, which is linked at the top, you can sign up for our newsletter. And within that newsletter, it's just a way for us to provide updates on the plan of different events that are going to be happening, our Sustainable U courses, as well as conservation and sustainability kind of seasonal tips. We're not going to flood your email box. This will be like one email every month or two. So you won't get bombarded by emails from us by any means, but it's our way to try and stay transparent with you through this process and provide updates easily. So thank you all again for joining us. We appreciate your time and your comments, and we hope you have a wonderful evening.